What's up, everybody? It's your boy Shane G back once again with another episode of Politics as Usual. So, before we get started, please make sure that you like the video, you share the video, you subscribe to the channel, and especially given what I'm going to be discussing today, I definitely want you to go back and watch last week's video. It is a full, a mostly full breakdown of Kamala Harris's record as the district attorney in San Francisco, as the attorneys general of California, as a senator, and a little bit as vice president. So definitely go back and check out last week's video. You get a full breakdown of her whole record. No biasness, no, oh, I'm on the left, so I'm going to cover for her, or none, there's none of that. It's a very straightforward breakdown. So I plan on doing the same thing today with our former president, Donald Trump. So, because those are the two front runners for the election. Of course, you have RFK, who's running as an independent. You have Jill Stein running in the Green Party. I'm not sure if the Libertarians have a candidate, but those are the main two: Kamala Harris, Donald Trump. So go back to last week's video and check out my full breakdown of Kamala Harris. It's a little over an hour. You know what I mean? So make sure that you got time to watch it, or, you can break it up in chunks, however you want to do it. But all the information in there, very important for those who will be, voting in November. So with all that being said, let's discuss Donald Trump. So, Mr. Trump, let's start with a really big issue that's going on right now, that a lot of the blame, rightfully so, has been placed on the Biden administration. But I do want to make sure that we're clear on where Trump stands on this issue as well. So this, of course, is Israel that we're discussing right now. We're talking about Israel and Palestine. So let's pull up this article. This is from PBS, and this is what they say. When President Trump, oh, right. So this is actually from when Donald Trump moved the embassy to Jerusalem. So when President Trump declared Jerusalem the capital of Israel and promised to move the U.S. embassy, the immediate response was relatively muted. What are the long-term strategic consequences? Nick Schifrin talks to former U.S. Ambassador Ryan Crocker and Paul Salem of the Middle East Institute. So this is an interview that they did. So Judy starts off. Last week, President Trump declared Jerusalem the capital of Israel and promised to move the U.S. embassy currently in Tel Aviv to the holy city. The announcement overturned decades of U.S. policy, but it was met with less outrage than many feared. Now, the decision may echo in the region and beyond, and to special correspondent Nick Schifrin. Judy, the president's announcement was dramatic, but the immediate response has been relatively muted. That doesn't mean, though, that there aren't longer-term strategic consequences. To consider that, I'm here with Paul Salem, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Paul, yes. I mean, first of all, it wouldn't be correct to measure the long-term impact by the amount of protests and violence. In the Palestinian communities, both in Gaza and the West Bank, Palestinians are exhausted. This was back then. I just want to keep in mind, right? This is when Trump was president and when he first moved the embassy to Jerusalem. They were already exhausted, according to Paul Salem, which is true. They had been dispirited for a long time. They had very little hopes that there was actually a peace process. This was very aggravating for them, but doesn't come as a big surprise. And many of them don't think having another violent intifada will get them any further. In the Arab world, there's a lot of sympathy for the Palestinian cause, and this issue of Jerusalem has sparked a lot of emotions and some protests. But most Arabs are mirrored to their own domestic problems, their domestic politics. The big uprisings of 2011 were really about domestic issues, so people care, but they don't want to ruin their own country or have a revolution because of it. And the final part, which is Iran and its allies, Hezbollah and so on, who have been organizing protests, also don't want them to get out of hand or turn violent because they're pretty happy with the way things are. So Ambassador Crocker, perhaps not only a little Palestinian fatigue, but also perhaps regional fatigue. Ryan Crocker, these things can take a long time to manifest themselves. So I wouldn't immediately rush to that conclusion that, well, the issue is no longer significant just because there wasn't any violence. I think that significance may only come clear in the months ahead. Nick Schifrin, no, actually quite the opposite. What I think we're talking about is those longer term strategic influences or impacts. So Paul Salem, one of them seems to be on the peace process, but it's not the peace process, the effect. It's about impacts for the larger region, isn't it? So basically, they are just going back and forth about how this is going to disrupt the entire region. And what did we see on August 7th? A big disruption of the region, right? Now, I'm not saying that wouldn't have happened if this move wasn't made. What I will say is this move didn't help matters at all, according to those two gentlemen, and, pretty much according to everybody else as well. So, not a good move. We're starting off not good on the foreign policy front. So, another big concern that everybody has is the economy, obviously. I've been seeing a common sentiment that the economy was a lot better when Donald Trump was president versus when Biden has been president. Now, yes, a lot of Biden's policies also contributed to the downfall of the economy and where it's at right now. That's absolutely true. I've spoken about that on this channel before, how, when they blew up the pipeline, that was a direct cause to our gas prices being inflated. All the money we've been sending overseas to Ukraine for the last few years, and now, well, not now, but still backing Israel, and they've been ramping up, so we've been sending them more money. Where do you think that cost is coming from? It's coming in the form of inflation for us, because we're sending all this money overseas. So now more people don't have money than they otherwise would have. And as a result of that, they're buying less things. So since people are buying less things, you have to make the things that people are buying more expensive, so that way the companies can still make a profit, because they're selling at the same price point, but they're not selling as much, then their profits go down. So that's how it all ties together. But this didn't help. And the next story that we're going to cover here did not help either. So next we have the 2017 Trump tax cuts that everybody, on the right wing, I would say, including a lot of voters, felt like was a good thing. And I was telling people when it happened, this might very temporarily help you out in the very short term, and in the long run, it's going to screw you. And we're seeing that now. We are seeing evidence of that right now. Corporations still making record profits while the workers are not even able to keep up with inflation. So we're seeing a lot of that is directly results from this tax law that was passed. So let's go through this article. This is from the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities. A high-stakes tax policy debate will accelerate this year through 2025 remember, this was updated last year, but was originally written. When was this originally written? I'm not sure. It was updated last year, but a high-stakes tax policy debate will accelerate this year through 2025 over the pending expiration of the individual income and estate tax provisions of the 2017 Trump tax law. Policymakers should use this opportunity to work towards a tax code that raises more revenues, is more progressive and equitable, and supports investments that make the economy work for everyone. As this debate unfolds, policymakers and the public should understand that the 2017 Trump tax law was skewed to the rich, meaning that households with incomes in the top 1% will receive an average tax cut of more than $60,000 in 2025. So that's next year, compared to the average tax cut of less than $500 for households in the bottom 60%, according to the Tax Policy Center. As a share of after-tax income, tax cuts at the top for both households in the top 1% and the top 5% are more than triple the total value of the tax cuts received for peoples with incomes in the bottom 60%. So that means the more money you get, the more money you save in your taxes, ultimately, based on this tax cut. And the poorer you are, ultimately, the less money you save out of your total, gross that you bring home for a year. Because that's a trick that they like to play. They like to use numbers rather than the ratio of how it actually affects your gross income. So, for example, if I'm a millionaire and I'm paying, let's say, $400,000 in taxes, that leaves me with $600,000 left over. Whereas if I'm a 10,000aire and I make 50 grand a year and I'm paying 20, 10 grand in taxes, let's say, then that only leaves me with $40,000 left over. So it's not based on the amount of dollars actually going into the system being paid out by individuals. It's about the ratio and how it actually impacts your life. Poorer people are paying taxes that they ultimately can't really afford to pay, but they have to. And they're receiving way less of a tax cut that would actually impact their lives in a beneficial way than rich people do. This is the top 1% and top 5% that are getting more than $60,000 in tax cuts. So let's just keep that in mind. It was expensive and it eroded the U.S. revenue base. So the Congressional Budget Office estimated in 2018 that the 2017 law would cost about $1.9 trillion over a 10-year period. And recent estimates show that making the law's temporary individual income and estate tax cuts permanent would cost another roughly $400 billion a year beginning in 2027. Together with the 2001 and 2003 tax cuts enacted under President Bush, most of which were made permanent in 2012 by Barack Obama. Doesn't say that part here, but that's who did it, who was president in 2012. The law has severely eroded our country's revenue base. Revenue as a share of GDP has fallen from about 19.5% in the years immediately preceding the Bush tax cuts to just 16.3% in the years immediately following the Trump tax cuts, with revenues expected to rise to an annual average of 16.9% of GDP in 2018 through 2026, which excludes the pandemic years, according to the Congressional Budget Office. This is simply not enough revenue given the nation's investment needs and our commitments to Social Security and health coverage. So in 2017, they estimated that this is going to cost the country $1.9 trillion. And then starting in 2027, mind you, so we're not even there yet. You know what I mean? We're not even there yet. Starting in 2027, in addition to this 1.9 trillion that is going to cost us over 10 years, individual income and estate tax cuts, which again, estate taxes are taxing dead rich people. Just keep that in mind. Would cost another roughly $400 billion a year beginning in 2027. So that's however long it goes, basically. So I add $400 billion per year, however long that goes beyond 2027, plus the 1.9 trillion. That's how much money the tax cuts have essentially robbed from this country. GDP is the total amount of money that the country, brings in, and it dropped to 16.3% after Bush's tax cuts, which were made permanent in 2012, once again by Barack Obama. And even when it goes back up to 16.9%, that's just not enough to keep up with what we dropped from. Failed to deliver promised economic benefits. Trump administration officials claim their centerpiece corporate tax rate would very conservatively lead to a $4,000 boost in household income. So meaning every household should be $4,000 per year richer. New research shows that workers who earned less than $114,000 on average in 2016 saw no changes in earnings from the corporate tax cut, while top executive salaries increased sharply. I'm going to repeat that. New research shows that workers who earned less than about $114,000 on average, so that's the majority of us, in 2016 saw no change in earnings from the corporate tax rate cut, while top executive salaries increased sharply. Similarly, rigorous research concluded that the tax law's 20% pass-through deduction, which was skewed in favor of wealthy business owners, has largely failed to trickle down to workers in those companies who aren't owners. Like the Bush tax cuts before, the 2017 Trump tax cut was a trickle-down failure. So there you go. That is a huge reason why the economy is in the shape it's in right now. As much as I don't like Joe Biden, and I do place a lot of the blame on him because there were certain things he could have done that probably could have, reversed this, could have fixed some of the issues, or at least at minimum not made them worse. A lot of his COVID policies were really bad for the economy. So add Trump's COVID policies as well. Like he was saying, he wanted to leave it up to the states and all of that kind of stuff. But, after all the research has come out, there was really no reason to shut the country down. There was just no reason for it. It didn't slow the spread. It didn't stop anything. People were, if anything, it just made people's immune systems weaker because they weren't going outside at all. And they were only staying in their little bubble. So like the second you were around somebody, you got really sick. Like I saw that happen a couple of times. So, but a lot of it was this 2017 Trump tax law. So this is two misses in a row for Donald Trump. The moving the embassy to Israel or to Jerusalem, bad move number one. The tax law, hugely, terribly bad law number two. So let's keep it moving and let's see what else Trump was up to while he was the president. Okay, now this one may actually be more for my, any Republican viewers that I might have. A lot of I'm not even going to say you guys. This became political, which is really weird to me. It became political in the sense of, I'm not going to say it's weird that it became political. What I will say is how it became political is the weird part, because as we see in this article, Trump renews praise, meaning he already praised it once. He's renewing his praise for the COVID vaccines, one of the greatest achievements of mankind. This is Donald Trump saying this. Okay. Now we have to remember, he was the one that was pushing the vaccines at first. Operation Warp Speed, that was all him. Now, at the time, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris were campaigning to be president and vice president at the time. So they were shitting on the vaccine. They were saying, I'm not going to take it. Oh, you guys trust Donald Trump's vaccine? Who's going to be the first one to take this brand new vaccine that nobody knows anything about? You going to do it? I'm not going to do it. These were quotes from Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. This is what they were saying. And Trump was praising the vaccine. A lot of people forget about that because as soon as Joe Biden and Kamala got into office, all of a sudden it was vaccine, vaccine, vaccine. They're great. They're great. They're great. Everybody go get one. Everybody go get one. And it was like, you just spent the last few months telling us that we shouldn't trust this thing. Now that you guys are in office, it's the same vaccine. They didn't change anything in the chemical compound or the makeup of it or anything like that. It's the same vaccine. All of a sudden now it's a good thing because you're in office. That's weird. So that's one weird thing. And then two, how the public reacted to it. It seems like every conservative out there was just super anti-COVID vax. I'm not going to call conservatives anti-vaxxers because I think that is a huge skewing of the actual reality. They were anti this specific vaccine. So now I'm not going to say that, there aren't other people who are anti-vax all the way around, but that's not an accurate way to describe what this was. This was COVID vaccine skepticism at you can call it that. But so the fact that it was all conservatives who were like, nope, I'm not taking it. I'm not taking it. I'm not taking it. And it was mostly people, in one shape or form or another on the left who were like, I'm definitely taking it. I'm getting all my boosters. I'm doing this. And if you don't, you're a horrible person and all of this stuff. Right. So it's weird that Trump was praising it. Liberals caught on to it and were like, yes, this is a good thing. Conservatives were like, nah, we're not doing it. And the Democrats at the time were like, nah, we're not doing it. And then as soon as Trump was not in office and Biden took office, all of a sudden those positions flipped. And it was all the, right-wing government officials who were like, no, this is bad. We shouldn't be doing the, the vaccine. You can't be forcing this on people and all of this kind of stuff. And it was, your Rachel Maddows and people like that who were like, hey, everybody needs to take this. It's going to stop. So it's just weird how all of it flip-flopped at some point. But I do want to just remind everybody, Trump was praising the vaccine. Washington, former President Donald Trump praised that. So this is already after he's out of office. Former President Donald Trump praised the efficacy of the coronavirus vaccines in a new interview just days after being booed by an audience for revealing he received a COVID booster shot. The vaccine is one of the greatest achievements of mankind, Trump told conservative commentator Candace Owens in an interview on Wednesday. While Trump has expressed opposition to vaccine mandates, he has long taken credit for the vaccine's development on his watch. I came up with the vaccine with 3 vaccines, all very, very good, he said in an interview, referring to the Pfizer, the Moderna, and the Johnson & Johnson shots. Trump also said people who are vaccinated are not the ones becoming seriously ill. The ones that get very sick and go to the hospital are the ones that don't do the vaccine, but it's still their choice, he said. And if you take the vaccine, you're protected. The results of the vaccine are good. Okay, so, yeah, I mean, this is pretty straightforward. I don't think we need to read any more of this one. This is how he feels about the vaccine, right? So let's see how consistent he is on this issue right here. So this is his vaccine rhetoric as of this year. So this is from The Hill. Public health advocates are watching in growing alarm as former President Trump increasingly embraces the anti-vaccine movement. See, they're already kind of doing it. I don't like that, but I will not give 1 penny to any school that has a vaccine mandate or a mask mandate, Trump said in a recent campaign rally in Richmond, Virginia. It's a line Trump has repeated, and his campaign said he is only referring to school COVID-19 vaccine mandates. But that hasn't eased fears that the GOP leader could accelerate already worrying trends of declining child vaccination. But see, I just want to pause there. That's you guys' fault. That's the media's fault for over-promising what this vaccine would do and saying that there were no harmful side effects and saying that it's going to stop you from getting the virus and it's going to stop you from passing it to other people when people were getting the vaccine and then still catching the virus afterwards and still giving it to other people afterwards. And then they were getting their boosters and they were getting even more sick. And then pure speculation, allegedly, I'm speculating. I don't know if this is true. This may not be a fact. Plenty, but all the heart stuff going on with people. You know what I mean? There's a lot of evidence and a lot of research out there. That's all I'm going to say about that. Check it out. So to say that this was just super healthy and you're just paranoid if you don't want to take it and blah, 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 like that's just super, it goes against the reality of the situation. It goes against your narrative, certainly, to be able to say what's actually going on, but that's what's actually going on. So that's why a lot of parents are starting to not vaccinate their children for other things, because now they're like, well, if you're lying to us about this and you say this is a vaccine and this is how vaccines are supposed to work, and I'm seeing results that I don't necessarily like, why would I want to put more of that crap in my kid? That's the mentality of it. So this is you guys' fault for lying about what the vaccine could do in the first place. That's the issue. Because of course you're going to cause skepticism and now a bunch of other parents aren't going to want to do it. So this is the media's fault. But anyway, let's continue. Trump is an important voice. He has a big platform, and he uses that platform in this case to do harm, because he's implying by saying that we shouldn't have he's implying by saying that we shouldn't mandate vaccines. Vaccines are in some ways ineffective or unsafe. He didn't say that. He said don't mandate them, which I agree with. I agree you shouldn't mandate them. The ironic part, Offit noted, is that the Trump administration kickstarted Operation Warp Speed, which helped drug companies use a relatively new technology to make 2 very effective and safe COVID-19 vaccines in less than a year. Throughout the campaign, Trump has performed a complicated tap dance regarding COVID vaccines. He simultaneously wants to take credit for their speedy development, but has also criticized their use and knocked his now former rivals for being too pro-vaccine. In a post on Truth Social reacting to Biden's State of the Union speech on Thursday, Trump again claimed credit for the COVID-19 shots. You're welcome, Joe. 9-month approval time versus the 12 years it would have taken you. Every state and the District of Columbia requires children to get vaccinated against certain diseases before they start school, including measles, mumps, polio, tetanus, whooping cough, and chickenpox. Yeah, those are all actual vaccines. Those, you take that shot and you never get the shit. I had a measles shot as a kid, never had measles. Mumps shot, never had mumps. Polio, never had polio. Tetanus, same thing. You see what I'm saying? Like, that's how a vaccine traditionally has worked. It's you get it, you take the shit once, and then you'll never get the disease. You're protected, literally. That's what it used to be. But since that is, again, not the way that this one worked, now you're tricking people into thinking what a vaccine actually is. That's the problem. Like most states, Virginia requires MMR vaccine, chickenpox, polio, etc. So Trump would take millions in federal funding away from all Virginia public schools. See, that's sort of misleading. He's talking about COVID. He's not talking about all vaccines because that's the way it always has been. Since the public health emergency ended last May, no state requires students to get the COVID-19 vaccine, while 21 states have laws specifically banning schools from requiring COVID-19 shots. Trump's campaign says his comments only apply to states that mandate COVID-19 vaccines, making it essentially an empty threat. Okay, so for the most part, it seems like he stayed consistent on that one. Now, again, what I will say is he should back off of that rhetoric, actually. He should be like, you know what? At the time, with the information that we had, I felt like this was going to be, the best solution for the country. And, but after more information came out and I found out Fauci was lying and I found out, that, masks didn't really do anything. And I found out that the vaccine wasn't actually what they said it was. And when I found out that the 6 feet rule was just completely arbitrary and made up, and they just wanted it to, they actually initially wanted it to be 9 feet, but businesses complained that we're not going to be able to fit enough people in our stores to still make money. So then they said, okay, we'll just make it 6. So there was no science behind that either. You feel me? Like, that's what's going on. So Trump should speak to that. But that would be him admitting wrongdoing, and he is not capable of that. So that's the issue. With that in particular, I agree with his not wanting to mandate. I agree with, saying it's a good thing, but people should have the choice. But he should clear up some of his rhetoric about only people who were unvaccinated were the only ones who got really sick. That's not true. Only the people who were vaccinated were the ones who were protected. That's not true. He should speak to these things, but he's not, because he can't admit when he's wrong. So that's a big red flag, I would say, for my Republican and right-wing viewers. That's a big red flag. He's still not admitting that he messed up with the vaccine. So let's move on. All right. So now what we're going to take a look at is some of Trump's foreign policy, because I feel like when it comes to this and when it comes to the issue of police in the United States, Kamala and Donald Trump are so similar. It's like, it's not even, it's kind of a wash almost when it comes to foreign policy. Now, I don't think that Kamala would use some of the extreme rhetoric that Trump uses, but when it comes to actions, again, because I'm a very action, what are you doing, not what are you saying person. What are you doing? When it comes to their actions, they're incredibly similar. So let's get into it. Trump proposed bombing Mexico, and it somehow wasn't a big story. What? Okay. Donald Trump went on national TV last week and proposed he did it on TV. How did I miss this? Donald Trump went on national TV last week and proposed bombing Mexico. Asked by Fox News' Jesse Waters if he'd consider strikes against drug cartels operating in the country, Trump said yes, and framed his answer as a threat against the Mexican government. Mexico's going to have to straighten it out really fast, or the answer is absolutely, the former president said. This is not a one-off answer to a straight question. Trump suggested firing missiles at Mexico during his presidency, asked advisors for a battle plan against the cartels last year, and recently proposed sending special operators to assassinate drug kingpins. The idea of war in Mexico is popular among the Republican elite. A Trump-aligned think tank even drew up a broad strokes plan for how such a war might work. There's every reason to take Trump's proposal seriously. Presidents tend to at least try to deliver on campaign promises, and they have nearly unlimited war-making power nowadays. As unthinkable as it may sound, there's a reasonable chance the United States will be at war on its southern border in the coming years if Donald Trump returns to office. So how come nobody's talking about it? The Fox interview has barely gotten any pickup in other media. The prior years of Trump musings about war with Mexico have been mostly ignored. A major party candidate is proposing the first North American war in over a century, and somehow it's not even a radar in Washington. This is part of a bigger problem. If you look at Trump's policy agenda, he's called for some wild stuff. Policy so extreme, had they been proposed prior to 2016, they would have defined the entire course of the campaign. Today, a few get some coverage, but mostly feels like sideshows, with policy as a category taking a backseat to personality and polling. I'm really happy that Vox said that, because that is the biggest thing that I see in modern day politics. It is literally a personality contest. It's just, I don't like him because he said this certain thing, so I don't like that. I like her because I feel like on some level I can relate to her. You know, she was in a sorority. I was in a sorority. You know, she went to HBCU. I know people that went to HBCU. You know what I'm saying? There's a lot of that kind of stuff rather than what we're supposed to be focused on, which is what they're going to do to make the country better. And that's on both sides. It's really more of a personality contest. And it seems like people don't really, they care about economic and foreign policy, but they've sort of just they're just like, you know what, there's nothing we can do about that. That is what it is. That's just going to always be what it is. So I have to focus on other stuff like abortion or, you know what I mean? Like, it's going to be a lot of like social issues type stuff. And, that kind of thing. Like, there's not really a big difference in the parties in their economic policies or in their foreign policy. And I think the country, unfortunately, has sort of just accepted that. And so now they're like, you know what? It doesn't even matter. Like, we're not even going to really focus on that kind of stuff, because you can bring up Kamala's record or you can bring up Trump's record on these things for people who say they're anti-war. And they'll be like, yeah, well, you know what I mean? Instead of getting upset about it, like, oh, this is the shit he was doing. Like, I didn't, you know, so that's an excellent point. Policy as a category is taking a backseat to personality and polling. That's 100% true. So that's Trump saying that he wanted to bomb Mexico while he was the president. So just want you guys to know that. And this right here is from the Council on Foreign Relations. So this is an overall look at Trump's foreign policy moment. So let's take a look here. 2017, he was inaugurated. This is a good move right here. A lot of people don't talk about this. This is actually a really good move. Trump directs the Office of the U.S. Trade Representatives to withdraw the United States from the Trans-Pacific Partnership, a 12-country Asia-focused trade agreement the United States had championed under the Barack Obama administration. That was actually a good move. That was not a good trade agreement for the United States. Now, if I'm not mistaken, and I'm sure we'll, you know, scroll down and find it, but I believe he signed us into another deal that is very similar to TPP. So it ultimately, you know, this was one of those, it looked good, but then when you look behind the curtain, it wasn't actually what it was. But this in itself is a good move. Travel ban. The president signs an executive order banning nationals of 6 Muslim-majority countries from traveling to the United States for 90 days. The order, later amended to include an additional 2 countries, also indefinitely freezes refugee intake from Syria. Days later, a federal judge in Washington blocks part of the order, beginning a series of judicial challenges. That same week, Trump signs 2 other executive orders concerning immigration. One directs federal funds to the construction of a wall along the U.S.-Mexico border, and the other bars so-called sanctuary cities from receiving federal grants. So, all of the cities that take in illegal immigrants, he basically banned them from getting any sort of federal grants, you know, as a way to dissuade them from taking in illegal immigrants, because he wanted to slow down immigration. The other thing that, his voters should be mad at, one directs federal funds to the construction of a wall along the U.S.-Mexico border. I thought Mexico was going to pay for the wall. That was like his big campaign slogan the first time. What happened to that? See, y'all just be letting him forget about stuff that he's promised before, and then y'all act like he doesn't be lying about this stuff. You know what I'm saying? Democrats call him a liar all the time, and I don't think it sticks as much because Joe Biden is a huge liar and Democrats are huge liars also. But that's a huge campaign promise that you just flipped on and said, no, we're actually going to be the ones paying for it. Sorry. Like, wait a minute. What? Why my tax dollars got to go to that? Like, that should have been the concern. But a lot of people just let this go. And they said, hey, he's building the wall. That's all I care about. Okay. April 7, 2017, striking Syria. In retaliation to Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's use of chemical weapons, sarin attack in an attack against civilians, which, by the way, was debunked. That never happened. That was a false flag attack. Assad did not attack his own people, nor did he use chemical weapons. Just want to point that out. Trump authorized a limited cruise missile strike on the regime-controlled Shayrat Air Base. U.S.-sponsored measures against the regime at the UN Security Council are blocked by Russia, part of a long-running trend. Revisiting NAFTA. NAFTA, I want to say, is the new TPP. U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer notifies Congress of the White House's intent to modernize the North American Free Trade Agreement, aka NAFTA. The administration seeks to renegotiate the agreement, whose other parties are Canada and Mexico, to address the U.S. trade deficits in goods, eliminate subsidies it sees as unfair, restore manufacturing jobs, and ease intellectual property restrictions. So maybe that's something different. Trump goes abroad, whatever. In a speech, Trump announced that the United States will withdraw from the 2015 Paris Climate Accord, another agreement negotiated by Barack Obama. Trump criticized the 195-country agreement under which the United States would have voluntarily limited its carbon emissions for constricting U.S. sovereignty, harming American workers, and disadvantaging the United States economically. That's only true if you have no plan of... Because the majority of our emissions are coming from our military bases. So if there's no plan to, okay, if we, shut down some of these bases, bring some of these troops home, it's like, then what? Then what are we supposed to do? It's like there's no plan for after that, for like, okay, we'll, help the soldiers find work. We'll reinvest that money over here. We don't need to be spending so much militarily because now we're going to close all these bases down, which is going to lower emissions, and then we're not going to be pissing off all these other countries. So that ultimately is going to make America safer. And we're making the world safer, by lowering the emissions. But instead of that, he just said, well, that's going to hurt us economically, so we're not doing it. And it's like, well, that's only because our economy is built on war. If it wasn't built on war, this shouldn't be an issue. Rolling back ties with Cuba, Trump meets Putin, war of words with North Korea. That didn't even end up turning into anything because they got cool. Winding down DACA. Trump and Attorney General Jeff Sessions announced that the Obama-era Deferred Action of Childhood Arrivals program will begin winding down in 6 months, leaving approximately 800,000 beneficiaries vulnerable to deportation. Trump encourages Congress to legislate a successor to DACA. Revisiting the Iran deal. After months of deliberation, Trump announces that he will not recertify Iran's compliance with the 2015 Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action to Congress, saying that Iran's behavior violates the spirit of the agreement. Trump does not take steps to abrogate the JCPOA. Instead, he asked Congress to deliberate on reimposing sanctions. Now, if you guys don't know what that was a policy in which the IAEA, I believe, the International Atomic Energy Association, I believe is what that stands for. Part of the deal with Iran was like, hey, we just want to come check on y'all every so often to make sure you're not building any nukes. We're going to let you continue to have nuclear power, for your power grid and for research and science and things like that. But when it comes to, if you have enough to where you could actually make a bomb, then, we're allowed to take action, essentially. That was the deal. That was actually a very good deal because in response to that, I believe Iran got their own money back that we initially took from them. You know, we didn't give them, because that's another misnomer about what happened there, is that we just gave Iran a bunch of money. It's like, no, we gave them their money back. Like if somebody stole a bunch of money from you and then said, hey, in order to get this money back, we need you to do XYZ. And then I do XYZ, I need my money back. So that's what was going on over in Iran. They weren't violating the agreement, but Trump backed out of it. I'm assuming that that's because of people in his circle who are, you know, they want to ramp up war. They want war with Iran. So they're like, yo, like, this is actually not good for us and blah, blah, blah. That's what I'm willing to bet happened because Trump is a negotiator. So if anything, this deal seems like it would be something right up Trump's alley. But either A, his ego didn't allow him to keep it there because Obama did it. And he was like, I got to do the opposite of everything Obama did. Or B, he had really bad advisors. And I'm willing to bet it's the second one. Here we go. Recognizing Jerusalem. We already know. So we got in a trade war with China. That's cool. In early April, China imposes retaliatory tariffs on the United States products worth about $3 billion, escalating a trade war between the world's two largest economies. By November, the United States had levied tariffs on $250 billion worth of Chinese goods, while China had imposed tariffs on $110 billion worth of U.S. products. At the Group of 20 summit in Buenos Aires in early December, Trump and the Chinese President Xi Jinping agreed to a ceasefire, as well as to strike a broader trade agreement within 90 days. And then on April 13th, he bombed Syria again. Tightening the border. The president institutes a blanket zero-tolerance policy in May that results in the U.S. Border Patrol separating more than 2,600 parents from their children before reversing the policy in August. In response to a spike in Central American asylum seekers, Trump sends 5,000 troops to harden the southern border. Withdraw from the nuclear agreement. There we go. That was that. Moves the embassy to Jerusalem. There was that. We withdrew from the Human Rights Council. Ambassador Nikki Haley announces that the United States will withdraw from the Human Rights Council, citing a chronic bias against Israel. Remember what I told y'all? Remember when I told y'all that he was going to be just as pro-Israel as Joe Biden and that he's not going to do anything different and that we're still going to be bombing the fuck out of Palestine? Yeah, that's this right here. A chronic bias against Israel and the human rights abuses of various sitting members, which include China and Venezuela. So basically they were saying, hey, because the whole Human Rights Council is essentially all stated what Israel is doing in Palestine. We condemn it. It's wrong. They need to stop. They're violating, international law. So Nikki Haley, who was the ambassador for the United States at the time, who was working under Trump, said that we're going to just leave the whole Human Rights Council because of the bias against Israel. Nothing going on with us, but because our homies over there are having an issue, we're going to just withdraw from the whole thing rather than trying to, make them behave better. You know what I mean? New NAFTA. They renamed it the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement. The trade deal contains new labor stipulations, stronger protections for U.S. intellectual properties, and higher standards for the auto industry, including rules of origin and minimum wage hikes that benefit American manufacturers. That's a good move. Good job, Trump. Picking sides in Venezuela, yeah. The White House recognizes Venezuelan opposition leader Juan Guaido as the nation's interim president, joining more than 50 other countries that consider the 2018 re-election of Nicolas Maduro illegitimate. As Venezuela continues to struggle with hyperinflation, shortages of basic goods, and a refugee crisis, Washington's attempts to send humanitarian aid are blocked at the border. Trump refuses to rule out military action against Maduro and later imposes sanctions. So they're already having hyperinflation, shortages of basic goods. And you think imposing sanctions is going to help them. We're sending them aid. It's being blocked at the border, so we're going to sanction you so that you can get even less aid? I don't understand. I don't get it. So this is more of that bullshit right here. Oh, you don't want to do what I want? Well, then we're gonna be assholes to you. That's what that is. Border wall battle, China war heats up, Iran, North Korea. Trump announces a safe third country agreement with Guatemala that will require asylum seekers to remain there rather than wait in the United States while their claims are processed or face deportation. The deal is challenged in Guatemalan court, but similar arrangements with El Salvador and Honduras were soon announced. The moves come after Trump issues new rules that asylum seekers in Mexico must remain there and uses the threat of tariffs to pressure Mexico to step up its own border security efforts. Stop sending your people here. That's what that is. Stop it. We don't want any of your people here. Otherwise, we're going to sanction you all. Impeachment inquiry over Ukraine dealings. The U.S. House of Representatives begins a formal impeachment inquiry into Trump over allegations that he withheld military aid to Ukraine to pressure it to investigate his political rival, Democratic presidential candidate and former Vice President Joe Biden. Trump denies there was a quid pro quo with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. And I don't believe that there was either. You know why? Because the FBI had Trump's phones tapped. They lied to the FISA court in order to get Trump taps on Trump's phones. So they would have heard something or found an email or a text message. They would have found something if there was actually a quid pro quo going on there. They just did that because the establishment, meaning both the Democrats and the Republicans, wanted to go to war. They don't like Russia. They wanted to use Ukraine. This was our way in. Okay, cool. We can use Ukraine to basically be our military for us so we don't have to use our troops for it. And we'll just send them all the money that we would have otherwise spent on our own troops. And instead of killing our guys, we'll let their guys die. Mind you, a lot of their military is Nazis. Like, let's not forget that either. Okay. So I don't believe that. I believe this was the establishment trying to, impeach Trump because he wasn't doing what they wanted him to do. It wasn't actually because there was a quid pro quo that, oh no, we're not gonna, because you didn't do opposition research for me, now we're not going to send you aid. Like, I don't think that's how it works. So more support in Saudi Arabia. Baghdadi, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. He died like a dog. That guy. Yeah, so we got him. That was in 2019, 2020. We did a drone strike on Soleimani, Qasem Soleimani. It killed him. He was the commander of the Iranian Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Elite Quds Force in Baghdad. So that would pretty much be like one of our top generals in the United States being murdered by, a random bombing. And if I'm not mistaken, this didn't even happen in Iran. I'm pretty sure this happened. Yeah, this happened in Iraq. He wasn't even in his own country. So that would be like if one of our representatives was up in Canada and then somebody from China shot a bomb into Canada and killed one of our top generals. That's exactly what this is. Then we impose sanctions on Iran after we killed their guy. We killed their guy and then put sanctions on them. This is Donald Trump. This is the foreign policy of Donald Trump. Just so we're clear. New Middle East peace plan. Now, this is actually interesting because publicly, again, he's very pro-Israel. He's very pro-Netanyahu. But there's been leaked audio of him basically saying, I was trying to go out there and do a peace deal. The Palestinians seem like they want a peace deal. Seems like Benjamin Netanyahu is the only one who doesn't want a peace deal. There's audio of Donald Trump actually saying this that got leaked. So, again, he's not going to say that publicly, but he knows what's up. He's like, I'm trying to push peace. It's Netanyahu that doesn't want it. So take that how you will, because again, publicly he's very pro Israel. So acquittal, cool. Yeah, they didn't find any evidence that he was trying to bribe Ukraine, just like I thought. We reached a deal with the Taliban. Then we have COVID. We already talked about that. We ain't got to worry about it. Drawdown of troops in Germany. Why did we have troops in Germany? Did you know we had troops in Germany? Defense Secretary Mark T. Esper says the United States plans to withdraw nearly 12,000 troops stationed in Germany, about 1/3 of the total U.S. force there. And so that means there's 36,000 troops over there, and we took out 12. That's nuts. And the head of the U.S. European Command announces that forces headquarters will be relocated from Stuttgart to Mons, Belgium. Esper says the moves will strengthen NATO, enhance efforts to deter Russia. Here we go with that again. And boost strategic flexibility. Trump says it in a response to Germany not holding its financial commitments to NATO. Insurrection at the Capitol, there was a lot of that's not really foreign policy. So, and I know a lot of you guys care about that and feel like, that was like a huge deal and like, oh my God, the country almost got overthrown. I don't feel like that. I'm sorry. You can't have a bunch of people trying to take over a country that don't bring guns. Just saying. And then there's so much evidence that the FBI was directly involved with, making that whole thing happen. So that issue, the whole January 6th thing, not really a big deal to me. In fact, I wish Democrats would do something similar and say, hey, we need everybody to rally. I said this on Graham with Elwood show, actually. I wish the Democrats or AOC or somebody would tweet out, hey, I need 50,000 of my followers to show up at the Capitol. We're going to do a peaceful protest, and we're not leaving the steps of Congress until they sign a Medicare for All bill. So I actually respect the strategy. I just don't agree with their reasons for being there. I don't think Joe Biden stole the election from Trump. I think he lost. You know what I mean? So there's that. But anyway, so we've gone over Trump's foreign policy. All of the war hawkish moves that he was making, all these ridiculous sanctions he was throwing all over the place. Let's look at him and J.D. Vance because they are now running mates. So let's see what Reason Magazine thinks is going to happen with them. Because they're thinking that this is an anti-war message it's a foreign policy that is very pro-war that is disguised as anti-war. And that is also what I believe. So let's take a look here. From the headlines, you would think that Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump and his running mate J.D. Vance were committed to overthrowing the national security establishment. Trump picking Vance widens rift with foreign policy old guard, reported Bloomberg. Trump's VP pick spells disaster for Europe and Ukraine, fumed Politico. For all of Trump's rhetoric about endless wars and Vance's attacks on neocons, however, the two politicians are all in on some of the establishment's most destructive military adventures, and in some ways, Trump and Vance are even more hawkish than the baseline. A lot of people recognize that we need to do something with Iran, but not these weak little bombing runs, Vance said in a Fox News interview at the Republican National Convention on Monday. If you're going to punch the Iranians, you punch them hard, and that's what Trump did when he took out Iranian General Qasem Soleimani. So for one, he's praising the fact that he took out that general, and two, he's advocating that you need to do more. These little weak bomb runs is what he just called it. Vance praised Trump for trying to enable the Israelis and the Sunni Arab states to fight back against Iran. In a speech to the Quincy Institute in May, Vance tried to sell a U.S.-Israeli Arab alliance in a way for the United States to spend less time and less resources in the Middle East. So again, proxy war, do the Ukraine thing. You send them money, send them weapons, and let them fight. Those are our enemies too, but we don't want to get in the mud, so you do it. That's what this is. But that's exactly the strategy that got us here in the first place, and the proof is in the pudding. Trump shows a force against Iran did not decisively end U.S.-Iranian conflict, nor did the Abraham Accords get Israel and the Arab states to pick up the military slack. Instead, Trump ended up overseeing a massive U.S. military buildup in the region during his term and nearly went to war with Iran. Vance even wants to add another counterinsurgency to America's forever war roster. In July 2023, he told NBC News that he would empower the president of the United States, whether that's a Democrat or Republican, to use the power of the U.S. military to go after these drug cartels. So that would be like the Chinese government coming over here and bombing LA because the Bloods and the Crips exist, or because, or bombing prisons because the Mexican mafia exists. Do we see why this is a problem when you put it in that context? I live in Phoenix. There's a lot of people in Phoenix and in Mesa, Phoenix, Mesa, Glendale, places like that around the city of Phoenix where gangbanging happens. Gangs are a thing out here. It's West Coast culture. They migrated over from LA. They here. So, and I'm pretty sure that I live around some at least reformed Mexican gangbangers. Like, I'm pretty confident in that. I can't say I know that for a fact, but if you know what to, you know what I mean? Like, if you know what you're looking at and you know what it is, then it's a pretty safe bet. So the whole complex needs to be bombed because there's some gang members that are potentially part of the cartel that live over here. Because that's what you're advocating for. So again, insane policy. And these are the type of people who Trump has in his circle. He listens to other people's ideas because he feels like the people around him have good insight and good knowledge when it comes to these things. But the problem is they all just have the same solution. It's the whole, if everything looks like a nail, my only solution is a hammer. And every problem is going to be a nail. So how do I solve those problems? With a hammer. That's what this is. Washington is already heavily involved in that region's war on drugs. Like, the whole war on drugs is because of us, actually. We're the ones who made the cartel stronger by making drugs outwardly illegal. You push all drugs to the black market. It's going to create a power vacuum for whoever's able to control that market. We saw it with the mob in the 30s when they did the prohibition of alcohol. That's how the mob got all their powers, because it went underground. They were like, oh, we'll just black market it because people still want to drink. Same thing today. People are going to want to do drugs regardless if they're legal or illegal. So if you make the people producing and selling the drugs the only people that have any say-so in that market, this is what's going to happen. So, yeah, this is our fault. The war on drugs is a failure, and it's our fault, 100%. Washington is already heavily involved in that region's war on drugs, doling out support to Latin American militaries and border forces. Last year, several Republican candidates, including Trump himself, called for the United States to invade Mexico directly. Trump and Vance also share the establishment view that the United States needs to get ready for a conflict with China over Taiwan. At the convention, Vance told Fox News that China is the biggest threat to America, and he has voiced support for building up the Taiwanese military with American weapons in the past. To his credit, Vance has been a little more thoughtful about the risks of escalation than some other China hawks. As a father of three young children, I really don't want to go to war with a country that makes all of our antibiotics, he said at the Quincy Institute speech. So for the neocons, maybe pump the brakes for at least 10 years. So you can't say both things, though. You can't say that China is the biggest threat to America and voice support for building up the Taiwanese military with American weapons, but then also say, I really don't want to go to war with a country that makes all of our antibiotics. Not just our antibiotics, they make all of our shit, period, damn near. We don't make anything here anymore. We make content here. We make content, we make media. That's the shit Americans are good at this point. We don't make anything else. Everything else is made somewhere else, usually in China, Mexico as well, and a lot of Latin American countries, but definitely China. That's where the vast majority of our products come from. So, and don't we owe them billions of dollars from the Iraq war still? Because didn't they pay for the Iraq war? I'm just trying to figure it out. The stance that puts Vance and Trump most at odds with the foreign policy establishment is their opposition to the U.S. military aid for Ukraine. In a February speech to the Senate, Vance complained that the experts have a new thing that American taxpayers must fund and must fund indefinitely, and it's called the conflict in Ukraine. He has also written about the munition shortages that the war is causing, a rare moment of honesty by a politician about the limits of U.S. power. Vance told Fox News at the convention that Trump will go there, negotiate with the Russians and the Ukrainians, and will bring this thing to a rapid close. He also said that the war simply wouldn't have started if Trump were in office. Yet in practice, Trump's policies towards Russia and Ukraine were just as hawkish as those of his successor. In fact, Trump was the first U.S. president to send weapons to Ukraine, a fact that he bragged about at the time. Okay, so yeah, see, this is the main thing. It's not really an argument against war. It's just a promise to be better at it than the last guy. That's who J.D. Vance and Donald Trump are. That's what you should expect out of those two gentlemen. Okay? We're closing out here. We're almost done. But I think I'm doing a pretty good job of illustrating how Donald Trump governed already when he was the president. Do I think he's going to become a dictator? No, you can't do that. The American government has 3 branches of government, all equal power. You can't just stay in office. That's just not how it works. Unless the military is on your side, you are not going to just coup your way into staying in office. So I'm not scared about Donald Trump becoming a dictator and all this stupid shit that everybody's been saying. He was the president for 4 years already. If he wanted to do all that ill shit, he would have did it. He had an opportunity. So I'm not really concerned about that. But the rest of this record so far, there's only a few things that I've said, like, yeah, that was good. You know, the First Step Act, good, where he let a lot of black people out of prison. And also will be preventing like over sentencing in the future of certain people. So that's very good, actually. You know, there were some programs that he implemented that definitely helped out black business owners and black entrepreneurs, you know, who are trying to start businesses or maintain their businesses. So I do want to give at least some credit because, you know me, I like action. Again, I don't care who does the right thing as long as the right thing's being done. So in this case, most of his policies and most of his record is just not good. It's just not. It's just not. He's left the country in a much worse place than where he found it. I'll put it that way. All right, we got another one here from Reason Magazine. Trump wants police to be above the law. Again, this is another one of those that I say is a wash between him and Kamala, because again, if you watch my video from last week, you already know she voted no as a senator when it came to increasing police accountability, transparency, you know, independent organizations investigating police, things like that. She voted against that bill. Donald Trump pledged to give cops immunity from prosecution. The idea is both legally illiterate and dangerous. In May, former President Donald Trump traveled to Wisconsin, a battleground state crucial to his 2016 win and 2020 loss. The stakes are high. He made a few big promises to match. We are going to give our police their power back, he told rally goers in Waukesha, and we are going to give them immunity from prosecution. Getting the dry throat. I've been talking for almost an hour, y'all. Shit. Appreciate y'all sticking with me. All right, we're back. There are a few problems. As president, Trump would be constrained in immunizing anyone, including police, from prosecution, as most proceedings are in state court where his power wouldn't apply. And while it's true that some officers are charged federally, where he could lobby the Department of Justice to refuse to charge any cop, Those prosecutions are often in addition to state charges. Take Derek Chauvin, who was convicted in a Minnesota court of murdering George Floyd. After that trial, he pleaded guilty to federal charges. President Trump could certainly pardon him for that, but it would make no material difference in the time Chauvin spends in prison, as his state sentence, 22 and a half years, and his federal sentence, 21 years, are running concurrently, which means both sentences start at the same time, and you're serving them at the same time. So once 21 years hits, the federal sentence is now gone, but you still have a year and a half on the state sentence because that's 22 and a half years. So it's not back to back where you would do 22 and a half years and then immediately do another 21 additionally after that. They run at the same time. So since that's the case, that would literally mean nothing for Derek Chauvin. He's got to do all 22 of them years. But despite the legal illiteracy of Trump's promise, it's worth considering the implication that those with the most power should be held to the lowest standard. Trump made clear in office that he'd fight legislation hamstringing qualified immunity, the legal doctrine that bars victims from suing state and local government employees if the way in which those employees allegedly violated the law has not been clearly established as unconstitutional in prior case law. So just to wrap all that up, basically what he's saying is you are not allowed to sue the state even if they do something illegal, unless this has already happened before and there's a precedent for it. So if there's no precedent set for your lawsuit, you're not about to be the one to set the precedent. It is why, for example, 2 California men could not sue officers who allegedly stole more than $225,000 from them during the execution of a search warrant, as there was no previous court ruling that said stealing under such circumstances is illegal. Federal police, on the other hand, are essentially protected by absolute immunity. So we don't even necessarily need to go more into this. Again, he wants the police to be able to do whatever they want with no consequence. And he's very unashamed about it. You know, so that's horrible. That's horrible as well. Here's the last thing. The last article here, we're going to talk about his record on healthcare, because y'all know that's a very important subject to me as well. And that's one of the only areas where I feel like Kamala is a lot better than Trump, based on just the voting record. Again, we'll see what happens, you know, if she becomes president, if she's serious about everything she's been saying for years. But according to her voting record and according, you know, to like her policy proposals and the things she signed on to and things of that nature, she is better on healthcare. You know, she's not fully all the way straight up Medicare for all that I would prefer, but she has a much better, she has the Australian system pretty much in mind for her version of healthcare. So let's see what Trump did. Since taking, this was written in 2020. Since taking, this is from KFF. Who is KFF? The independent source for health policy research, polling, and news. Okay. Since taking office, President Trump has laid down an extensive record on healthcare, beginning on day one with his clearly stated intention to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act, and continuing through his most recent response to the COVID-19 pandemic. In addition, the Trump administration has made or proposed many changes to health policies and programs that could have a significant impact on health coverage and health care. President Trump's record on healthcare illustrates his priorities. An incumbent president's record is always relevant, but especially so for President Trump, who has not released more conventional campaign policy proposals. Moreover, the president's response to the COVID-19 crisis and its economic consequences can influence how voters view him later on. Okay, cool. From the start of his oh, shit. I hate when this starts happening at the end. I don't want to edit all that, though, so. From the start of his presidential term, President Trump took aim at the Affordable Care Act, consistent with his campaign pledge leading up to the 2016 election. He supported many efforts in Congress to repeal the law and replace it with an alternative that would have weakened protections for people with pre-existing conditions. Remember that before Obamacare, insurance companies could just say, no, you have a pre-existing condition, we are not going to insure you. Or we will insure you, but it's going to cost you so much more money than the average person because we're eventually going to have to pay for whatever your medical thing is. And again, we have to understand how insurance companies work. The more profit they make is based on them not providing coverage. It's based on them figuring out ways to get out of having to pay for shit while every one of their customers are still paying in monthly. That's how they make their money. Let's just keep it real. So he wanted to replace it with an alternative that would have weakened protections for people with pre-existing conditions, eliminated Medicaid expansion, and reduced premium assistance for people seeking marketplace coverage. While the Affordable Care Act, remains in force, President Trump's administration is supporting the case pending before the U.S. Supreme Court to overturn the Affordable Care Act in its entirety that it's scheduled for oral arguments 1 week after the election. They have moved forward on many other healthcare fronts. The administration has proposed spending reductions for both Medicaid and Medicare, meaning less money for those who qualify for Medicaid and Medicare, along with proposals that would promote flexibility for states but limit eligibility for coverage under Medicaid. For example, there would be work requirements, like what, if you're handicapped or whatever, it's like, well, you don't have a job, so sorry, we can't do it for you. The president has made prescription drug prices a top health policy priority and has issued several executive orders and other proposals that aim to lower drug prices. Most of these proposals, however, have not been implemented, other than one change that would lower the cost of insulin for some Medicare beneficiaries with diabetes, and another that allows pharmacists to tell consumers if they could save money on their prescriptions. The Trump administration has also moved forward with an initiative to improve price transparency in an effort to lower costs, though it is held up in the courts. President Trump has made other policy changes that have had a direct impact on reproductive rights. We all know about the whole abortion thing that's been going on for the last couple of years, immigration, and on other healthcare issues that convey his priorities in the future. This issue brief provides a detailed overview of the Trump administration's record on healthcare issues, including major proposals and actions on healthcare during his tenure. So that's right here. That's this link. So yeah, not good. Not good. Stripping protections from people, making it harder for people to access Medicare and Medicaid, saying that you want to put less money into Medicare and Medicaid. What were you trying to do for the people? It seems, again, after reviewing Kamala last week, this seems to be more of the same. So, again, Kamala seems way better on healthcare. Foreign policy, they seem to basically be a wash. Domestic policy, when it comes to police, they basically seem to be a wash. This isn't looking good, y'all. These are our two choices. We just went through his whole record as president. I left out the business stuff on purpose. I left out the fact that he's a felon now on purpose because, no fan of Trump, but I do feel like a lot of that was some bullshit. They were just trying to figure out a way to have it so that he couldn't run, and that didn't work. So, that's what I got for y'all today, man. That's Donald Trump's record. Review it for yourselves. Again, I'm not here to tell you who to vote for, who not to vote for. All I'm here to do is to show you what they did, what their actions were, not necessarily just what they say, because most of the time that doesn't line up. So not just what they say, but what they do. And hopefully I've painted a clear enough picture of both of our candidates so you all can make an informed choice. You going to vote? Who you voting for? You voting for one of them? You going to vote for Jill Stein? Going to vote for RFK? Huh? Maybe? If you're going to vote for one of them, though, you should at least know who you're voting for. So again, if you missed the Kamala breakdown, that came out last week. Go ahead, check that out. And, share these videos with your people who need to be informed on the actual policies. This is not about personality. This isn't about rhetoric. This is about what do you do when the pen's in your hand? And now I think we have a good idea about what both of our candidates would do. So until next time, this is Shane G. This is Politics as Usual right here on the Ethos Media Network. Please make sure you like, you share, and you subscribe for all the latest content. And I'll catch you next week. Peace.